EURAXESS Smart Talks for Talents, your personal guide to research careers, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Hi, I'm Daria, a senior expert of the EURAXESS National Contact Point in Latvia.
And I'm Jovan, a teaching and research assistant from Serbia, and you're listening to EURAXESS Smart Talks.
EURAXESS is a unique pan-European initiative of the European Research Area providing information and assistance services to researchers regardless of their career stage.
Backed by the European Commission and 43 European countries, it supports research mobility and career development while enhancing scientific collaboration between Europe and the world.
The title of today's episode is Discover Careers Beyond Academia. This is the first part of a two-part episode. According to a recent OECD report, the academic research career track is highly unstable for young researchers. The main cause is that the number of tenured academic positions has not grown at the same rate as the number of postdoctoral researchers.
Despite the shortage of available positions, universities still largely focus on preparing researchers for academia. In Netherlands, for example, 69% of Ph.D. holders currently work outside academia, but only 13% of current Ph.D. students feel well prepared for non-academic jobs. To help close this gap, the report recommends that universities provide professional career development to postdocs to help them acquire skills beyond fundamental research.
In this episode, we will explore how to better connect with non-academic research employers through mentoring, awareness of professional options beyond academia, and meeting career development needs for higher employability and more.
We are excited to welcome Mr. Xavier Eekhout. Xavi is an active member of the EURAXESS Hub projects who leads the work package, places a special focus on careers beyond academia. Mr. Eekhout himself is a biologist turned EU project manager. He has participated in many research projects and co-authored several papers on animal acoustics, communication, and annual behavior.
Xabi, who specializes in international project management, collaborates in the management of the EURAXESS Spain network coordinated by FECIT and is a founding member of the Rebeca project Researchers Beyond Academia mentoring program. Xabi, thank you very much for joining us.
From this short introduction, it is clear that you have a lot of experience in research, career beyond academia, and mentoring. The Career Beyond Academia work package in the EURAXESS Hub's pilot focuses, as its name implies, on careers beyond academia. Why is this an important area to focus on right now?
You've already touched what I would call the basic points in the introduction. So the reality is that, it might depend a little bit on the disciplines, it might depend on the countries and so on, but probably you're never lying completely when you say that 90% of the researchers who start a research career, and I'm thinking in PhD candidates, will not be able to stay in academia, just for a matter of numbers. So that's a reality. In addition, you've also mentioned it in the introduction, the support provided for this career transition, which is going to be happening, as I said, to a majority of the researchers, normally is lacking. And again, this is a generalization, but again, in general terms, researchers are trained to be researchers in academia and not to be researchers in other sectors.
In which way do you help them transition from a career which is centralized on development for academia to a career which focuses more on opportunities which are presented beyond academia?
Well, the focus of our mentoring program is actually, let's say, on the very first step of what could be this transition. So what we know is that the reality, as I said, is if you are doing research within an academic setting, most probably your peers are going to be researchers in an academic setting, and that's the end. That's the end, especially for early stage researchers. That's their professional networking. So what we try to address in a first level with the mentoring program is to increase the number of professional references that early stage researchers can have. So with the mentoring program, we put in contact these early stage researchers with highly skilled professionals working with some connection to research development and innovation, but not doing academic research.
What other activities are planned in this hub?
This is actually Rebeca comes from previous projects, so this is kind of an evolution of the program. So the differences that we have that we are going to be we are implementing in EURAXESS Hubs project First of all, is that we're trying to match pairs with the nature that I described from different countries. So we're trying to have international matches. The previous editions that we have implemented, the first one was also an international collaboration with other EURAXESS colleagues, but still the implementation was national. On top of that, due to the nice success, EURAXESS Spain implemented between 2020 and 2021. We implemented a second edition at the national level, although with some international context. And in this case, thanks to the support of the EURAXESS Hubs project, as the experience has shown us that there is much to gain in this model of mentoring, we're going to try, the main difference is trying to upscale to the European level this mentoring program. Of course, this brings a number of challenges in terms of, let's say, intercultural communication, because it's a reality. We know it's a challenge that pairs that come from different countries are going to be facing, but we'll see how it works. But in addition, we know from previous editions that mentees, particularly, one of the things that they told us that they would like to improve, if possible, is to have further connections with non-academic professionals. Let's say to not only speak with their mentors, but maybe meet other mentors and ideally meet other companies and organizations and so on. So with that input, what we decided to do, what we are doing in EURAXESS Hubs on one side is that we are connecting the mentoring program with matchmaking events, which will bring together business representatives with early stage researchers. It's not only going to be Rebeca mentoring participants, that's the starting point. So, and in addition, what we are going to do also, thanks to building up this international community, we're trying to reinforce the networking possibilities by creating an online community of people, both from the side of the early stage researchers, but also from the side of the mentors, people who are interested in intersectoral research careers.
How you reach out to those researchers who you mentioned, this first stage?
Well, I mean, mainly in the case of the early stage researchers, that's the easy target because EURAXESS by definition is really close to the academic world. So basically we use our EURAXESS peers, the members of our national networks as a speaker to call out to the early stage researchers. So normally that's not the biggest challenge that we have. The challenge is a bit more on the side of the mentors, where we have to use definitely professional contacts as EURAXESS, but also all of us work within an institution. So through other of my FECIT colleagues, and even in some cases, even we started with some personal contacts, people who you met during your PhD and that are now working in a company. So
it's kind of word of mouth.
Yes.
What we are talking about. Okay.
You have worked for so many years as part of EURAXESS and mainly focused on the academic aspect of its work. How did you first get interested in mentoring for careers beyond academia?
Actually, it's, let's say that the explanation, thinking in the history of EURAXESS as an initiative basically explains this evolution. So we have been trying for a long time as an initiative and including ourselves as national coordinators in Spain to engage private sector EURAXESS activities. So to get representatives of the private sector into our national networks, to get organizations of the private sector to publish jobs, funding, and so on. And that's been a fight for quite some time with, at least in our case, I can say openly, with limited success. The fact that the initiative made a transition towards a more holistic support to researchers from the point of view of career development sort of allowed us to change a little bit, let's say, the strategy. So what we did is, we tried to support the researchers by having this contact with industry. And in this way, at the end of the road, we engage industry in our EURAXESS activities. And that's one of the main lessons that we learned from the first edition of Rebeca. And it's that suddenly you are chasing private organizations, private research employers, to try to bring them into EURAXESS, to listen to the EURAXESS story and engage them. And the fact that you do it through a mentoring program, so you're proposing something very specific, which is you as a professional, share your professional experience with early stage researchers, actually change a little bit the balance. So suddenly we get interest from the side of the private sector to participate in the mentoring program.
So what are the objectives of the Rebeca program?
The first one, the most basic one, is that we want to help early stage researchers. And as I said, we do not want to push them outside of academia or anything. We just want them to be more informed about their professional opportunities, because we think that with more information, their capacity to manage their own career development simply improves and is better. On a second level, we also have this interest of putting in value researcher profiles in non-academic sectors, because that's also a challenge that we have. I mean, it's not only about getting the researchers to be more aware and work in their career development in order to work in another sector, but it's also to inform other sectors. Like, we got these very valuable and very highly skilled and trained professionals. We have, let's say, a third objective, which is an EURAXESS objective, which is learning how to do a mentoring program. So the first Rebeca edition was a complete pilot. We never had implemented a mentoring program ourselves. So we also want to learn by doing and sharing the information. So if 20 years from now, instead of having the 20th edition of Rebeca managed or coordinated by FECIT, what we got is a ton of Rebeca programs all over institutions across Europe with their own mentoring programs. That's also a success. That's also one of the things we're looking for.
And what are the current results of the Rebeca project which you would like to highlight?
Well, in the first edition, which, as I said, was the pilot, we had extremely high levels of satisfaction. And this was, it was around 80 something percent on the side of the mentees, which is always very satisfying for us as managers of the program. But to our strategic objective, a bit of a surprise was that the level of satisfaction of the mentors is even higher than that of the mentees. This also increased the interest of the private sector organizations to engage in Rebeca, and that was one of the key results. The second one is, I also mentioned it already, and it's connected to this high satisfaction of the mentors, is that private sector starts getting interest, and then you realize, I come from the academic side, if I have to identify myself with one side or the other, which is something we shouldn't do. So coming from the academic side, I've been in that position of, evil companies only value money and results and things like that. And then you realize that there are actually a number of lines within many organizations, even hardcore industry organizations, which are really open to this kind of collaboration and looking forward to it. So, the level of altruism is really amazing.
And also it's a proof of concept. If people who work in companies who are in the higher management see your project as a success in the theoretical field, but it's also a success in the pragmatic field of the work of that company. So it makes business sense to do it.
Actually, I have it's a very limited and very almost an anecdote of the second edition of Rebeca, the one that we did at a national level. But for me, it's the perfect example of how the mentoring program has become a game changer in our relationship with industry. I got invited to a podcast that Badger Spain does regularly for sharing, let's say, their social concerns and their practices, which are for the benefit of society. Well, they have that podcast, and one of them, they invited us because we had several mentors from Badger. Probably few people apart from my family were listening to that podcast. But still, it's Badger inviting me, an EURAXESS member, to participate in their podcast, which has never happened to us before.
I also wanted to ask you, what are the next steps for the Rebeca project? What do you plan to do?
Yes, as I said, currently it would be, let's say, a third edition of Rebeca, which we have called Rebeca by EURAXESS, and we're doing it within the framework of the EURAXESS Hubs project. And as I said, the main difference is that we've gone to this European level. I have to admit that 60%, of the participants are located in Spain because, of course, after 3 years, we have a bit of a branding, if you wish. But still, the other 40%, we have 50 representatives from 15 countries. So we have quite a significant amount of international pairs. And finally, we have set up 100 pairs. And as I said, we have this community. Go to the EURAXESS LinkedIn and we have there a showcase of all the Rebeca activities. And that's what we will be doing along the next month, preparing the matchmaking events and trying to keep the community alive and moving.
Can you give us a tip for young researchers, young talents who wants to pursue a career beyond academia?
We are focusing on the side of Rebeca on the very first step, which is go out, speak with people, and see what's out there. It's the basis of any career development procedure. The first thing is about a self-assessment and knowing what's out there in order to plan your interest. You participate in a mentoring program such as this one, you will have additional support, but this is something you can also do from an individual side. Because in the first program, and that I think I mentioned it correctly, we talked about satisfaction. So by the end of the activity, we asked people, mentors and mentee, how did it go? A number of questions. Do you think it was useful? And very positive feedback. But that's not really impact. That's a perception. So in the second edition, what we did is basically make an initial survey at the beginning And we had several questions about self-assessment. And these key questions were things like, how much do you know about your professional options out there? How much do you know about your research skills being an asset beyond academia?
Mm-hmm.
And how much do you know about the gaps that you may have in order to do a transition? And we got the questions at the very beginning before we introduced the mentees to the mentors. And and the percentages, we have it in our website, but the percentages were really small about the people that agreed or strongly agreed on the level of awareness they had. And by the end of the program, we repeated the questions and the increase was. So again, it's just through the conversation with another professional, somebody who provides another professional view. Suddenly you start thinking about the things that you do, how to sell them, how to put them in value. The fact that you know better your options, I think that are for the benefit of becoming a better researcher. I always provide my example. I was doing a Ph.D. of very basic research, as you mentioned it, about frogs. And at some point, I got really stressed and said, okay, I'm not going to continue this way, and I just need to leave and run. Well, probably with a more informed approach, you can do a PhD in very basic science, and hopefully you can use the research that you're doing for your next step in another sector, but not necessarily. You can just use what you've learned through the process, the skills that you gained and so on, in order to then do the change.
Thank you very much, Shabi. That was very interesting. Thank you. EURAXESS Smart Talks for Talents, your personal guide to research careers, innovation, and entrepreneurship. We are happy to welcome Dr. Tomas De Garay Herrera. Tomas is an example of a researcher who successfully made the transition from academia to industry. As someone who has had a positive experience in the Rebeca project, both as a mentee and a mentor.
Tomas received his PhD in cell and molecular biology in France and then moved to the private sector, Refine Ltd. In Helsinki, as the European sales manager for mass photometry lab instruments, a revolutionary technology for biomedical research and biopharmaceutical development of novel therapies. Tomas, could you please start by telling us what made you move from the academia to an industry job? What was your motivation?
Hi, Jovan. Hi, Darja. Thank you for having me today. So my main motivation is during my PhD, I realized at one point I had very much the experience of going very deep into a single topic and making new discoveries in science. But I did not see myself in the long term in that type of job or position. I wanted a wider perspective. I wanted a wider view of science. And my current role as a sales representative and applications as well allows me to interact with researchers, with many of them across Europe, help them develop in their research and get a more shallow view of many different research projects, questions, etc., with obviously a lower level of depth, but in a much more varied position. That was my primary attraction for this role, I would say.
That's very interesting. So basically, you wanted a wider range of science fields which you could learn about, and the industry job which you chose in the end provided them. Do you see some additional benefits when you compare an industry job and one concerning research that's done at the university?
Well, I would say for my particular job as a sales specialist treating directly with researchers and with end users, the people aspect is also very important for me. I am a people person. I like to interact with different people, travel. But if you ask me in general, differences between industry and academic jobs as such, I would say it very, very much depends on what job in the industry you could like to go to. A single path, because it's more or less narrow and we all know about it. There is not such a thing as an industry path. There are many different ones. So I'd say if you are just, willing to try out and see what you like, this industry path allows you to mix and match and see many different variations of this path and choose it for yourself and move horizontally within the industry in that sense. I did all those things, the masters, the PhD, etc., because I liked them individually and they led me here. I would not probably advise you this path that I did unless you want to do it like that or you like it. It's definitely not the only path to get here. But the path itself was also very interesting for me and I learned a lot. And again, right now, I'm not in this position because I want to get somewhere else. not necessarily part of a path I have predefined very much. I am in this position because I like it at the moment, and I see myself doing this for a number of years. Where it leads me in the future, that's something else, but I prefer to take things one step at a time.
I'm sorry, you also mentioned that the path you chose isn't necessarily the best one for the career which you're currently doing. I was wondering, are there any benefits that you have from your research experience, from your experience as a PhD student, which you can apply now?
Yes, there are. I mean, many of them. So it depends on the company. It depends on exactly what product you're working with. The more technical it gets, and the thing I sell, it's a big instrument for a lab on a new technology for highly technical people. So you need to be big on biology and biochemistry, but also on physics behind what we do and the process of the measurement. Having the research experience, it's certainly helpful. My conversations are with the end users of my technique, which are researchers. So just to give you an idea, for instance, in my team, even though it's not technically a requirement, everybody has a PhD. And this depends on the company. This depends on the product that you sell and on the stage and the organization in the company. So it's not a requirement for everybody, but it's certainly a big addition and something we look for when we recruit for people. I wanted to go to industry, and I more or less had clear what type of role I wanted to try out first, type of field applications. So with the Rebeca mentorship, that is something I signed up for, 3 years ago? Or it was for the first edition. And so I signed for that once I had already made the decision. That at that point I realized, okay, now I know what I want to do, more or less, at least where to start. I have made a decision, but I have no clue how to implement it. So that was the next step.
Oh, very good. You had this strategy, but no tactics.
Exactly. So that's where Rebeca came in. I saw it. I found it online, to be honest. And I thought it was a really good alternative, a really good initiative. I signed up for it. I was lucky enough that they selected me for this first edition, which was relatively small. And I got a mentor for 6 months. And he and the program in general really played a role on giving me the tools about how to actually implement this change that I wanted to make, how to practically go about it. So things about how to network, how to look for opportunities, how to identify them, how to sell myself, and identifying my values and my skills.
And tell us, please, if there's something one can do before you apply to something like Rebeca program.
There are certain things you can do. You can try to talk to people outside of your circle. There are many resources online. They're just a bit hard to find. They are not readily available at your university's board. But there are resources, there are forums, there are conferences. Just talk to people and try to really figure out why you are applying for a certain role or why you want to do a certain role, where applicable to those jobs, all those kind of things.
Thank you very much, Thomas. It was inspiring. Young researchers that are listening to our podcast, I hope they can get also inspiration to find something what they like, and it won't be only academia, or if it will be academia, then they still could look from time to time on the industry and look up what they're interesting for them to see. Thank you very much. It was very nice to have you as our guest.
Thank you.
Thanks to you. Thanks for the opportunity.
After hearing a personal interview with Thomas, a success story of the Rebeca project, let's take a closer look at how EURAXESS, and particularly the EURAXESS portal, can be a tool to help researchers in developing their careers.
EURAXESS Smart Talks for Talents, your personal guide to research careers, innovation, and entrepreneurship. We are pleased to introduce Ms. Dalila Coviello, the Information System Coordinator for EURAXESS EU portal on behalf of the European Commission since September 2021. An Italian national living in Belgium for the past 7 years, Dalila has more than 8 years of experience in project management, communication, and dissemination for EU-funded projects. Dalila, we are happy to have you with us and looking forward to hearing your perspective.
Dalila, we are very happy to have you today with us and are looking forward to hearing how EURAXESS and particularly the EURAXESS portal can help researchers in developing their careers. In recent years, EURAXESS has experienced transition from providing mobility services to providing career development services for researchers. Why is this important? Why should researchers join EURAXESS? How can they benefit? And for those wanting to know more, where can they find more information about EURAXESS?
Thanks a lot. First of all, thank you very much for your invitation. I'm glad to be here and to take part to EURAXESS Smart Talks today. So I will try to answer your question. First of all, starting from why should researchers join EURAXESS? I think there are plenty of reasons to invite researchers to join EURAXESS. EURAXESS is a pan-European initiative aiming at providing researchers with concrete support towards a series of tools. First of all, we have a network of people behind EURAXESS working every day to provide this concrete support, free of charge, of course, and tailored to the different situations of researchers. There are more than 18 topics on which the EURAXESS network is very well prepared, let's say, to assist our researchers. We are talking about pension schemes, entry conditions, visa, job funding, and hosting opportunities. So amongst the many reasons researchers have for joining EURAXESS, there is indeed access to a pool of international job funding and hosting vacancies, but also the possibility of knowledge exchange with peers, access mentoring programs, participating to events, webinars, physical gatherings. So there is really a support community behind, let's say, the concept. And indeed, as you mentioned in your question, mobility service continue to be part of, let's say, EURAXESS core mission. This is what, let's say, the main purpose, one of the main purposes EURAXESS has been launched 17 years ago. But of course, that's not the only aspect of it. And as you will explain, the career development becomes more and more important. I would say it is equally essential for researchers at all stages of their careers. It is proven that developing and implementing a strategy to pursue specific career goals lead to usually greater success, but also personal satisfaction. Career development is a great tool that we have to recognize the strengths or areas for improvement, let's say, to maximize each researcher's potential, using already the development opportunities at our disposal, but also equipping each profile with more advanced skills and expertise. And of course, in his mission and vision of providing researchers, but also research performing organizations with the best tools and practical support, EURAXESS network expanded its services towards career development with a specific dedicated section of the portals, offering a career handbook, an e-tool, and other specific resources that serve both researchers and organizations willing to add such services to their portfolio. So I would say that a researcher or a young talent or even a research performing organization looking, let's say, to include career development in their personal or professional plan could definitely benefit from joining EURAXESS network and utilizing all the tools and their services that we have at our disposal on the platforms.
So can you tell us why EURAXESS is transitioning to the ERA Talent platform and how this will influence the work of EURAXESS staff and help researchers, of course?
EURAXESS is one of ERA's success stories. It has been launched 17 years ago and a lot has been achieved. However, of course, this cannot be taken for granted. It is very important to make sure that EURAXESS continues to thrive. So ERA Talent Platform wants to be an improvement and enhancement of everything that EURAXESS is already offering. In terms of EURAXESS network, I can say that the platform will provide the network with more efficient and effective tools to implement their work, of course, building on what has been done so far, since it is essential and cannot be discarded. So making EURAXESS fit for the future. There are many aspects that, of course, are already partially or completely addressed through EURAXESS that we want to target better and to respond to better throughout the transition towards the ERA Talent platform. I'm talking about governance or user experience, but also data gathering content usage or privacy. These are just some of the topics that we want to address towards, let's say, the transition towards the EURA Talent platform to make them better, of course. So to provide even better services and to provide the tools both for our own network to continue the great job that they have been doing so far, and for researchers and organizations joining EURAXESS while they are looking for tools and for support.
There are probably going to be listeners who are not yet members of EURAXESS. Could you emphasize again how can they join EURAXESS and where they can find more information about EURAXESS?
So joining EURAXESS is a very simple process. One can just visit the portal at euraxess.ec.europa.eu. And let's say it's very easy to experience how registration really takes a couple of clicks, both for researchers and for organizations. Creating a profile is very simple. It's just, let's say, through an email. For organizations, of course, they have to first create an individual profile. All the details to enrich one's profile, both for researchers and for organizations, can be filled at a later stage. In the very beginning, just an email and a password is sufficient to create a profile, and this already gives access to a lot of information. The pool of job funding and hosting opportunities becomes accessible, but also one can explore all the other sections of the portal, the career development one, the several initiatives that we have, Charter and Code, Human Resources Strategy for Researchers, pensions, resavers, Science for Refugees, and of course, they can also visit the national portals. We have 43 at the moment, and the 9 EURAXESS worldwide hubs in case they are interested to other destinations. Of course, the more they fill in their own profile with the relevant information that is asked, the better matchmaking can happen when it comes to the opportunities they are looking for, or if they are looking, let's say, to join a mentoring program, to find a peer to exchange information with, or in case of organizations, to find the next talent to join their team. But the registration process is really easy, so I invite everybody to visit the platform and to take a concrete advantage of everything that we have to offer.
To conclude, what message can you share with our listeners? Can you share a tip for young researchers, talents interested in developing their careers?
So if I would have, let's say, to share generic tips that I think are applicable both to, let's say, to any young researcher or talent who is trying to understand the best next step for their career, professional path, I would say that they should remember that one can never learn too much, nor start planning too in advance. Of course, let's say a plan is just a plan, and most likely it will require updates or adjustments at any moment. But in my opinion, having one from the very beginning of, let's say, the choice of a professional path can only be beneficial. That's why career development is so important. And I think it should start, let's say, the earliest possible, from a bit of self-assessment of their own skills and interest, and this often could lead to explore alternatives that maybe at a first glance we would have not even considered. Of course, it would be great if such a self-assessment could be, let's say, followed by a good overview of the actual possibilities, the options that are out there, to realistically match them with our own personal preferences or inclinations. I think it's very, very beneficial to take advantage of the numerous learning opportunities at our disposal nowadays. This can be physical or can be virtual. We have so many webinars, so many trainings that are even free of charge. So this is essential to develop new competencies, but also to perfect and refine the ones that we already had acquired throughout our professional. And this really prepares for the next steps. And of course, after planning and preparation, the implementation phase can finally start. And I think that like this, any young researcher or talent would make, let's say, the most out of all opportunities that we have. And on a more personal note, I can say, let's say, a personal tip that I feel like sharing, I think that it is very important that everybody tries to stay through to themselves throughout the whole process of planning, of acquisition of competencies, skills development, and so on. I feel that authenticity can often be the best reward, both at professional and personal level.
Thank you very much, Dalila. It was very interesting and really a huge amount of information that should be digested, I think, by our listeners. We have touched upon so many subjects. Career development tools that are possible for all the researchers that could be registered on the portal. Then, of course, job possibilities, possibility to change their work from academia to industry and meet those industry leaders as well through EURAXESS portal, and of course the support from the staff of the portal. Thank you for listening to the EURAXESS Smart Talks podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and it was useful for you.
Do you want to hear more? Part 2 is waiting for you on the EURAXESS portal and on your podcast application.
In the next episode, you will hear tips from an experienced career expert, an inspiring success story about the transition from academia to a high-level position in industry, and more useful update information from a high-level EU policy officer.
For more information on EURAXESS, visit the EURAXESS portal. You will find more episodes of the EURAXESS Smart Talks podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
This episode was prepared by hosts Darija Aksenova and Jovana Ranđelović, audio engineer Pavle Drašković, outreach manager Dina Sameret, production manager Morija Riha, editors Iser Per and Miroslav Trejanović.
This episode is published under the Creative Commons CC BY license.
Until next time.